Okay, guys, welcome to the fourth episode, and this is the one I have personally been waiting the most for. On the other side of the screen, we have Musab Zulfikar. To me, he's a mentor, a big brother, a man who's helped me so much throughout my life. I always go for this guy for advice.
Shahab is my younger brother. Ever since we got introduced, it was like a long lost brother we found. So I'm happy to be here, my guy. I love seeing you do your thing. Love seeing you get successful. Put that work in, all that kind of stuff. Everything you're doing, proud to see it, man. So a little bit about me. I have a lot of things that I'm juggling right now. I'm kind of like working on a few projects. I'm keeping them on the DL. I won't lie to you because I'm trying to come up there out of nowhere, if that makes sense. But really passionate about healthcare, really passionate about sports, really passionate about working out, really passionate about building and maintaining businesses, public speaking, that kind of stuff. Just leading projects. I think that's where I find my passion. Very similar to Shahab in the sense that I can't sit still for too long. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
The craziest thing is, our parents are from like the same place. I think you said your mom's from Lahore, correct?
Yeah, my dad's from Lahore. Yeah.
Your dad's from Lahore, and I think one of them is from Kashmir too.
My dad's family is from background is Kashmiri. Yeah. Yeah. When you
Yes.
told me that, I'm just like, come on.
Yeah, that's crazy. See, my mom's from Lahore, but her family's background is Kashmir too.
Yeah, yeah. I remember you telling me that. I see your dad on Fridays every now and then now after Jummah. And I'm just like, I see that Kashmir side and I'm just like,
Yeah.
yeah, no. Like I can recognize it from a distance. I mean, obviously now that I know he's your dad, but even before that, I was just like, yeah, looks Kashmiri.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing, man. Yo, it would be crazy if we somehow ended up being related, eh?
Yo, I wouldn't be surprised at this point, man.
Yeah, but with how inbred Kashmiris are, bro, you never know.
You never know.
All right, let's get right into a serious question here, most of my. One thing that we're both very, very passionate about seems to be men's mental health. Do you mind delving into what you believe is the biggest issue today in terms of men's mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting point. So I'll actually give a bit of a background as to why I'm even into men's mental health. It never started with an interest in mental health. You could say I had a bit of a toxic mentality with this. So why are we even discussing mental health? It's not really a thing. My interest stemmed from a personal interest in men's physical health. That's something I was really passionate about. Hormonally, how to boost testosterone levels. I found that whole mechanism of maintaining male hormones and hormonal health. I found that very fascinating. I think I was really interested in that because I grew up playing a lot of sports competitively. I was very competitive in quite a few sports, aggressive sports like football, boxing, basketball, that kind of stuff. And so I always wanted an edge. That's when my passion started and delved into the human physiology. I loved learning how to build muscle. I loved learning really intricate details of biomechanics, all that kind of stuff. But then I wanted more of an edge as like I started getting older with more competitive instances. And then I started reading about hormones and I started understanding how much of a difference those can make in athletic performance, but also in everyday life. We've discussed many studies, you and I have discussed many studies on the importance of maintaining healthy hormonal levels for even your confidence or even your approach to happiness, life, etc. So I became really interested in that. That interest lasted and it's still going on. It's still something I actively research and I'm very interested in. And then I realized that there was so much more to this equation. And this was very, I guess you can say very personal because I had a few personal experiences myself. I still remember I was doing a rotation once and there was an instance I had where I had a bit of a trigger. There was like a racist experience I had to go through during one of my rotations and it triggered something in me. There was a very particular word that was said and it really triggered something in me. And I talked to someone that was in the field. He was one of my mentors, someone I really looked up to. And I asked him, I said, there's going to be racist patients. I don't know how I'm going to deal with that. And so he's the one who kind of pushed me towards understanding that. And the reason I was able to respect it was because I know he's someone that I wanted to model myself after. So when he gave me that, I guess you could say, green light to accept that there's nothing wrong with trying to understand and improve your mental health, that's when I kind of allowed myself to get over that edge. And from there, I realized that it's all tied together. And that's around when we met too. It was like men's hormonal health, men's physical health, men's mental health. All of it is tied together. And that's kind of where it stems from.
Yeah, that's an issue I have with modern allopathic medicine where they view the patient simply through the lens of their hormones, through the lens of their neurotransmitter, especially psychiatry. Whereas patients are more than just that. You have to go into it with more of a humanistic, holistic lens where, as you stated, it's your mental health, it's your physical health, it's your hormonal health. What other external factors are impacting the person? What sort of frame of mind are they going into this with? Now, you brought up the fact that in your moment of despair, you went and reached out to a mentor. How are you able, or how were you able to find the right mentors?
That's a good question. That's a really important question too. I think that's one of the most important questions anyone should be asking. And I guess let me take a step back and kind of let me explain why I even wanted to find a mentor. I think that mentality is the most important thing to have first, right? Before you even go looking for one. Because if you don't know what you're looking for or why you're looking for it, you're gonna end up with just talking to pretty much anyone, making someone that you might not even align with your mentor, right? So that it's an important question, probably requires a bit of a more nuanced answer. Essentially, I think it was around there were people that I right, and there are people that I look up to. There were people that I wanted to model my life after. But then there was also another aspect that I hadn't considered before, and that was understanding that I have a set of values. And I think that's an important piece of the equation that people really don't consider. Because let's say your goal is to be a millionaire, and you can find many millionaires, right? And you just make one of them your mentors. But let's say you have a deep intrinsic sense of principle or of honesty or something like that. And then the millionaire mentor you made is a drug addict. I don't know, like someone who is on the streets or whatever. There's a clear difference there in values. You can't fully align with this person, even if you might be able to take some really good life advice and some really good mentorship from them, but it would never be the ideal what you need. That was a bit of a tangent, but I remember when someone explained that to me, that's when I kind of started to take this a little bit seriously. And so from there, what I realized was finding a mentor is a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be almost like a homework assignment where you have to sit down, try to like figure things out, then look for people and research and all this kind of stuff. It's actually a lot easier than that. Essentially, the best way to do it, you continuously put yourself in an environment that you are trying to go after. So let's go back to this example of someone who wants to be a millionaire. Where are they going to be? They're going to be in conferences, maybe. They may be in business events, networking events, that kind of places. Wherever what you want to be, people with that mindset are going to be. You put yourself in those environments as much as possible. And then you put yourself out there, you try to talk to as many people as possible. During this, you're going to improve your social skills as well. And then naturally, it just happens. That's the interesting thing. That's what people don't realize is sometimes you're putting effort in, but it's a very indirect effort to get a direct result. You put that effort in and you keep talking to people, naturally, you're going to gravitate towards someone. And then they're also going to gravitate towards you. So that's how strong, powerful mentorship starts.
It seems that in order to find the right mentor, you need to have values. How do you go about developing the correct values?
I think if you're true to yourself, you'll just realize them naturally. The best way to realize them is to take away the barriers. There's going to be barriers along the way. If you can eliminate those barriers, if you can remove the barriers between what would naturally come up, let's say, for example, you're in high school. People go through peer pressure in high school. If you can recognize it makes you uncomfortable to bully someone, which it should, and instead of doing the easy thing, which is ignoring it, you actually stand up against it. Then you're naturally making an identity for yourself. And when you continuously put yourself in a position of making your identity very clear, not only is it becoming clear to other people, it's becoming clear to you. And when your identity becomes very clear to you, now you have something that you can strongly believe in within yourself, that this is a set of values that I'm very consistent with. Consistency in things that are making you uncomfortable and standing up for things that make you uncomfortable and doing things that you know are right consistently. You're showing that to yourself. And that's how you recognize what your values are.
Do you think young men should be spending their 20s looking and finding and defining their values?
I think that should be established earlier than that. I think core set of values should be established as soon as possible. I would say even puberty, that's kind of when you start. Because here's the thing, those are going to change. Core values don't necessarily change, but you adapt your interpretation of the world. So if you ask me 10, 15 years ago, a question about, I don't know, let's just say hard work. This is the first thing that came to my mind. If you asked me what that looked like 10 to 15 years ago, maybe that's a bad example because maybe it's probably the same. But for the sake of the example, I can tell you that my interpretation of how the world works has changed over the years. So maybe 10, 15 years ago, I would tell you, yeah, you work 24/7, you keep working until you can't do anymore. Maybe now I'll tell you, be efficient. Find a way to be efficient because then you can use that extra time to make sure you have a cup that's full emotionally, physically, make time to work out, make time for your friends, family, and that will help you more in your work. You see how interpretations of such a simple concept change over time. Yeah. If you don't have a base, you have nothing to kind of refine those values. So I think it should be done a lot earlier than that with an understanding that, or with humility that it can change over time. Again, not really the core values. I think those are fairly consistent for what I've seen, but just refining those values, ethics, character, that happens with experience and time.
Don't you think that that's the job of religion, where religion serves to help you define your core character and values?
That's a good point, and that's something I didn't mention because maybe not everyone is religious, but I guess I could say for myself, I was fortunate in having that kind of defined for me. It's kind of like I guess I had a passion for purpose in my youth, and I found that purpose through God, through understanding that, okay, I want who I am to be defined by how God sees me. So you can say religion. And for me, my core values were kind of defined already by what they should be. Everything that I hold dear to me in terms of my character and my values, it was kind of like influenced by religiosity. So that did help a lot for me.
What would you say to the young man who's 18, 17, 16, 20, 19, watching this video thinking, oh, instead of finding God or religion, why don't I just define my own philosophy and use that philosophy to guide me for the rest of my life?
That age, whether someone is religious or not, right? Even if we take religion out of the equation, I think it would be so arrogant to believe that at such a young age you have all the answers. I think it's hard for someone who hasn't seen the world, who hasn't really been through things, to be able to say that my way is the right way, a way that hasn't been tested, has been tried, has been true. To just say that I can make a law for how the world should work and go based on that from my 18 years of life. I think it's important for them to be able to think for themselves. I don't deny that. I think they should, whether they're religious or not, I think they should be thinking with a very critical lens, especially in that youth where everyone's kind of doing the same thing. It would be unique and important to be able to separate yourself from the crowd. I'm not saying that they shouldn't think, I'm not saying that they should just blindly follow something, but to be able to say that you have all the answers at that young of an age, I don't think that's a wise decision, not only for society, but even for oneself, because then you're kind of closing off the ability to learn. Because naturally that happens when you think you know everything. I've unfortunately been through this stage. There's a stage in your youth around your teenage years where if you're someone who thinks you already have all the answers, you kind of become a lot more closed off to accepting improvement. And self-improvement is something you talk about a lot. How can you improve if you already think you have all the answers? I think it's a barrier coming between that person themselves, that young man himself. He develops or allows himself to develop this mindset.
To take devil's advocate here, because I do agree with what you're saying. Let's say now I'm thinking, but Musab, Shahab, but the thing is, I'm not finding all the answers myself. I'm going and searching up philosophers like Nietzsche, like Kierkegaard, and borrowing their philosophy and applying that to my life. And I'm not saying that my philosophy is static. I just don't like this whole religion thing. How would you respond to that?
Good question. As someone who holds religion dear, I would have to give a religious answer, right? I guess my first question would be, what is the purpose of life then? I've heard many takes to this answer, and usually a lot of those takes are not, and maybe this is just my experience, they're not really, it's almost like someone is trying to convince himself. It almost seems like someone is trying to convince themselves that their answer is the right answer. It's hard to have a conversation if there's no baseline. We can both agree on that. Me and you have been in debates before. We've had our differences and our car rides, but we always had a base that we can kind of refer back to. I'm just giving an example to make it easier to understand. We always have a base that we can refer back to. And then when we kind of do that, just because we are reasonable people and we're having a reasonable discussion, one of us can actually be like, you know what, I actually kind of see your point. If there's no base there, if you can't agree that there's a purpose to life and you can't find some common ground there, it's really hard to be able to even have a conversation at that point. What are you going to do? If someone believes that there is no purpose, this isn't a mockery by any means. Actually, very much, I think it's important not to do anything blindly. I guess you can say there is a level of understanding almost for people who may be going through this phase where they're looking at philosophy. I've been there, and many of my friends have as well. There is a level of understanding there, but nothing can happen unless there is a desire to even have that conversation. So that's the first place I would start. To answer your question, if someone approached me with that question, or they were just like, I don't want this or this, like I just want to focus on philosopher, before I even have that conversation with them, I would want to know what are they hoping to get from this? Is it just like they want to prove a point? Is it just that there's a lot of bitterness or resentment towards religion itself and they're trying trying to drive me away from it? What is the end game here? And if it's any of those things, I honestly don't think there's any point in even having that discussion. There's not enough maturity in there for me to even make a point. I'll just kind of be like a babbling idiot at that point, or it'll just be into an argument that doesn't have any end. But if there's common ground and there is a desire for a purpose, if there is a desire for a genuine understanding or a desire for truth, as we call it,
Mhm.
then what I would say to them is that same exact question. Why do you, if you believe in a purpose and if you believe that things aren't by chance, and if you do believe in God, then don't you believe that He would have the answers? Instead of, I feel like that would be the first way I would approach it in having that conversation. And again, that's not coming from, I have all the answers kind of thing or something like that. It's not coming from an arrogant approach. It's coming from a genuine desire to have conversation with someone. Like if that's truly what they believe, I would want to know why.
That was a very interesting response. I spent some time thinking about it myself and how I would go about it. So, would you disagree that even Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, all these philosophers are either promoting or reacting to religion? Henceforth, you cannot escape religion itself because people are a byproduct of their time. And during that
You make
time
a
of
good point.
Kierkegaard,
Yeah, everyone's a slave to something. As much as people hate the word, we can use a different word then. I know people hate the word slave nowadays. At the end of the day, everyone is loyal to something. Everyone is loyal to something. That's just human nature. It's interesting because the ones, if I ever have this conversation with someone, they'd be like, oh no, I'm not loyal to anyone. I'm not obedient or a slave to anyone. Usually it's that person, in my honest experience, it's usually that person who is the most loyal to something, but that loyalty is to their own emotions, or that loyalty is to their own ego, or that loyalty is to the gym. But it's always something. It's not, people dedicate their life to something. Let's say someone who make a whole thesis on how religion's a problem or whatever, they're doing a PhD on this. Well, you're kind of a slave to science, or your loyalty is with science, or your loyalty is with philosophy or something. Like there's something there.
in terms of science, how I view it is people who are slaves to science, what they fail to realize is science itself is a tool for the pursuit of knowledge, a tool to justify the things in this world, not more so justify, but to mitigate the risk of something being wrong. Science, in my eyes, is a tool to better understand God, to better understand religion. But some people deify the tool itself. Some people turn the tool into religion. To move on to the next question, what do you think the purpose of life is?
To sum it up very easily in one sentence, it's to use whatever faculties, talents, everything, time, whatever you have to please God in a way that would allow you to use those faculties. Usually, for the most, I would say 95% of people, in my opinion, it's through serving humanity in some way. And I think that's how you kind of cross that barrier and reach that level of recognizing your talents and whatever you're doing it for God, but doing it through serving humanity. That's essentially a summed up version of what I think purpose truly is.
How would someone go about finding joy, finding happiness, finding purpose in a world where God does not exist in their paradigm?
I think the word joy and happiness, I think what I have noticed is that those words themselves are so subjective for people. It's hard to give it. Number one, I don't know. I can't answer for them anyways, right? Because I wouldn't know what their motivating factors would be. I wouldn't know what, nor can I answer for someone who does believe in God. I don't know what people's motivating factors are. Everyone is so different. But I've also come to notice that the word happiness, especially, is so subjective. I don't think there's any like actual consistency amongst people as describing what happiness is. So in that sense, yeah, I don't think I'd be able to do any justice answering that question because it's just too subjective.
Let's move on to the next topic, which is going to be based around masculinity. So, why do you think people have such a visceral reaction to masculine traits nowadays?
I think the word itself is a trigger word. I think that's kind of where it starts. I think we had good intentions. When I say we, I'm talking about society. I think we had good intentions when there was a first kind of like a revolt against what we deem now as masculinity, or I guess the buzzword is what, toxic masculinity or something. So I think it started with good intentions. It was kind of just like, okay, look, many people with the male gender are abusing some of the privileges they have in society. So I think that's where it started. I think it's kind of blown out of proportion now to the point where we've almost taken it to an extreme where now it's just become a trigger word. It's like any aspect of something approaching what could be considered once as aggressive, which I think was the whole purpose of starting this revolt, is aggression. Because that's kind of, if we talk about toxic masculinity, what exactly is it? In my opinion, from what I understand, it's kind of like any kind of crossing a boundary of aggression, not just physical aggression. Like I think it's kind of talking about all forms of aggression: emotional aggression, mental aggression, bullying, verbal aggression. So anything that even approaches that now, or what people think can approach that extreme is now labeled as toxic. And so just the word toxic masculinity, I think that it's almost like it worked in a pair. It's like the word toxic and masculinity were used together. So it's almost like masculinity got that same perception of the word we have of toxic, right? So it's become this buzzword that people are really against, and anything that kind of even approaches something that could be considered masculine also gets the same negative sense. It's just such a nuanced topic, and it's so hard to even know how it started, because both you and I were kind of like in the midst of it. We were, because I'm a little bit older than you, so maybe a little bit more for me. It just almost started out of nowhere, where some things that were not really considered negative when I was like really young suddenly became negative in my teenage years. Even I was confused. For example, one aspect of masculinity is what chivalry. One aspect of chivalry is doing things like opening the door or paying the bill, helping someone in need, especially if it's a female, giving your seat for her. And then there was a weird phase. I think that's kind of slowly fading, thankfully, but there was like this weird phase I remember going through where people actually started getting offended by that. And I think it stems from this misconception of treating all aspects of what was once masculinity, just accepted as masculinity, as toxic. Anything that even approached something that would differentiate the masculine from the feminine was being seen as something that could approach toxic masculinity. I know it's a bit of a complicated answer. It's also a very complicated situation, because I kind of been through this, for example, growing up 5, 6 years old, and then to like 16, 20, 25 years old. There's just been such a drift, such a shift that I've seen in just society itself. And even I was confused by it. I'm up here trying to understand the situation. I don't understand how this is a problem, and I don't understand why this would anger someone so much, or why are so many aspects of this being controlled. It was a mess, to be honest. So I think the word itself has become a negative connotated buzzword.
How do you think the drop in level of testosterone over time has impacted our view on masculinity? And what are some ways whoever's watching this video right now can go and increase their testosterone levels?
Yeah, good question. I think the whole, going back to an earlier question you asked about what got me interested in men's mental health, it was actually this, and I mentioned it was the physical side. So this is kind of what stemmed my interest, or what started the whole thing. I was starting to research why there was such a shift in hormonal levels in general amongst men, especially young men, in more recent decades compared to more the older decades, even as early as our fathers. Our fathers, to our generation, there was such a drastic change in what would be considered normal hormonal levels, testosterone, DHT, estrogen, all this kind of stuff. What was once considered normal in those decades to our generation has just shifted. And I was really interested. But why? Like, what's been the difference? And repeat your question for me.
The second is, what are ways young men, whoever's watching this video right now, can go and increase their testosterone? What are some steps they can take?
If it's an actual problem, like if you're getting all those symptoms and there's quite a few, and you've got your blood test done and there's a drastic change, of course the natural approach is important, but at that stage you might have to understand what the underlying cause might be. So this is more for the people who actually do have a problem here. There's just no question, if there's an underlying problem why you have low testosterone, say your thyroid levels are out of whack, your vitamin D is low, you're not going to address that. The natural methods are kind of secondary priority for you. But for the average person, there's a lot going out there. I used to follow every single thing to the T. Every single thing I used to be like, okay, you can't have even a bit of soy in anything that I eat. Can't, if I use plastic, might as well, plastic is going to reduce my testosterone levels by 200%. Just stuff like that. Like, I was very OCD about it. And then I realized those things actually have a more minimal effect, although they are important. But the main things really are what you would tell anyone trying to lead a healthy lifestyle anyways. Getting enough sleep, something I don't do in all honesty, just because it's hard to do in society. You understand, you know how it is. The grind is hard, but that's something that needs to be prioritized. Getting good sleep, healthy diet, something, again, very hard to do. But if you do exercise, but very particular types of exercise, so more high intensity exercise, if you're able to just do these three things consistently, getting vitamin D in your diet, the main things, if you can just do the average healthy lifestyle, and you weren't doing that before, that's already going to make a drastic change to your testosterone levels. Everything after that, and this is assuming, again, there's no underlying cause that needs to be addressed first, everything after that is extra. And that's kind of the icing on the cake, depending on how important this is to your life. If you're someone who's a perfectionist, OCD like me, then you're going to want to follow everything. Avoid plastic, avoiding heating things in plastic, even the kind of food that you have, being cognizant that, okay, macadamia nuts are good for testosterone, almonds, not necessarily so. And this is very, very small, intricate, almost unimportant stuff. But I'm just saying, like, you're building a lifestyle around it, and you research these things. Something as simple as adding pomegranates to your diet because they help manage estrogen levels. levels, making sure you're resting instead of working out every single day, because being in a state of inflammation is not good for you all the time, right? Like aggressive inflammation, you don't want your body to be inflamed all the time. Another thing, anti-inflammatory diet. You see how all these things add up? It's really a ripple effect that if you do all of that from the beginning, it's going to be hard to be consistent. You won't be able to be consistent. That's why when I approach this question, I always first try to see, if I'm working with a client, I first try to see, are you even doing the basics right now? If you're not sleeping, if your vitamin D levels are very low, if you're not working out, if you're a fat ass, if you're literally don't have a good social life, you're not, this is an interesting one. If you're not actively competitive, believe it or not, competitiveness is a very important aspect of raising testosterone levels. And that doesn't have to be competitive in sport. It can be competitive in the workplace, but something. First, I would want to see, is this person even doing the things that an average person who wants to be healthy is doing? And if not, then that really is the priority. There's no point in me telling you to not drink from plastic bottles anymore if you're not even doing that. Maybe plastic, that is an important thing to cut out in the early stages. But one of the biggest measures, and I know I'm spending a lot of time on this question because it's very important to me. One of the biggest measures that was seen with some of the studies that I've looked at in terms of people whose testosterone levels increased in the more recent period over a short period of time drastically, believe it or not, it's people who were very overweight. Losing that weight is something as simple as that. And it's just like we're so focused, because I remember, I'm talking about myself here, I was so focused on every little aspect, because I love to go running. That's one of the exercises that I actually really enjoy. It's one of the forms of exercise I really enjoy. And I know there were some studies on how testosterone levels goes down like after a long run. Since then, there has been some rebuttal and some debate on this, where people are just like, okay, that's probably right after the run, but it kind of evens out later on. But anyways, I was just so focused on that I wanted perfectionism that I stopped running. And I was just like, I'm not going to do long distance runs anymore. I'm only going to do sprinting. I'm only going to do aggressive weightlifting, powerlifting. And I was exhausted all the time. I was like in pain. I was not recovering from workouts. I was just like tired. And I was just like, why are things not changing? And I'm realizing here, let's take a step back. Am I someone who's 10% body weight that not running is going to have? You know what I mean? If you need to lose fat first and running is something you enjoy, that's going to help you get to that state, that's going to have a drastic improvement in your testosterone levels. So I know it's a complicated dancing around the question answer, but that's because it's a very complicated topic that I think is simplified. And because it's so simplified and almost dumbified down for people, they end up doing silly things without addressing bigger things first.
Very thorough answer. And if anybody needs any testosterone coaching, Musab's information is going to be linked in the description. Check him out. I guarantee you, after 2 or 3 coaching sessions, you'll see the difference. You'll see the difference. Now,
Absolutely.
Musab, how do you feel so far about the podcast?
I love your podcast, man. We work together. I know you ask interesting questions and they're engaging. I enjoy your engaging questions. I like the purpose of the podcast. So I'm happy to be here.
All right, let's move on to a couple more questions. We're going to end it in about 10, 15 minutes here. Cut it down.
Perfect.
Now, how do
You're
you
good.
deal with
You're good.
exhaustion? There you go.
Oof. I wish I had an answer for you. That's something you and I both struggle with that, man. We both are workaholics.
Do you think people use work as an excuse to run away from their problems, i.e., they work hard in order to avoid the conflicts they have in their interpersonal relationship?
I'm sure people do. I haven't seen it. I think that people get easily labeled as people that do that. It is my own personal experience. I haven't seen people necessarily run away from their problems through working hard, or maybe situations. Like, let's say they had an argument with their spouse or something, and they're just like, okay, I'm just going to focus on this or something like that. I haven't ever seen them run away from problems, maybe delay it and kind of like try to get their thoughts together or something like that. I do know people do that though. I have heard that stereotype is kind of common, but maybe my own interpretation of that is not on point. So
Do you think people have this stereotype in place more so to stop people from working hard, as they're envious of people who do put in the effort towards achieving their goals?
I don't think everyone has that mentality. I think people have different priorities. And I think for the most part, I'm sure there are some people like that, but I think for the most part, people do have other people's best interests in mind. And so maybe someone who approaches the world in the sense that you need downtime, maybe people who value peace more than they value success, or not even success, just like a sense of accomplishment. Maybe the sense of peace is more important to them than a sense of accomplishment. Maybe they believe genuinely is in the best interest of someone else to cut it down. And so maybe they'll advise them based on that. I don't think someone would go way out of their way like that to try to step. I mean, I have heard it. I haven't seen it in my own life, but I have heard there are some people, of course, who kind of like you hear this very often, especially with successful people. They're always just like, there's many people along the path that kind of try to stop you because they don't want to see you get ahead. It's because I haven't reached that point yet in the public eye. But I think people usually have the other person's best interest at heart, especially if it's someone in their inner circle.
How do you find the discipline to work hard?
That's an interesting question. I think it's a hard question to answer because I would say different aspects of life might be easier to be disciplined in than other aspects. So, for example, I find it very hard to be disciplined with eating vegetables. I'll be very straightforward. Like, I literally have to like throw it in a blender, take it like medicine, and be done with it. I hate it. I can't understand how someone can have a salad every single day, 2 meals a day. I can't fathom it. So that's an aspect of discipline that I have not mastered, but someone else has. There are people that are doing this consistently. I think discipline in and of itself is easier in certain places than it is for others. For example, discipline with fitness, that's something that's important to me. So I think that is based on the fact that it's just easier for me to be more disciplined in. I enjoy working it. So it's easier to be disciplined with that than it is to be disciplined with eating a salad. It's a very simple example that I'm giving, but it's trying to paint a picture. I think if you find joy in something, or if you can trick yourself into finding joy in something, then you're naturally going to become a little bit more disciplined in it. Actually, let's go back to that point right now. I heard a very simple but very interesting kind of take on this from someone that I admired in the fitness industry. I asked him, how can people get to the level of fitness or physique of a bodybuilder, like the average person? Because that does take a lot of discipline, no matter what people say, what they say about bodybuilders. That sport itself, to compete in it, takes a lot of discipline. And so he responded, he was like, most people enjoy the feeling they get from working out after they work out. That feeling, when you develop an interest, almost an obsession in that feeling, then you might start working out more. When you start working out more, maybe you'll start loving to work out. When you start loving to work out, maybe you'll start seeing changes because now you're doing it consistently in the mirror. When you start seeing changes in the mirror, maybe you're just not going to want to pick up that burger anymore. When you stop picking up that burger, maybe you're going to be able to start eating a little bit healthier in your diet. When you start eating a little bit healthier in your diet, maybe now it's a lot easier to be consistent with a healthy eating pattern and fitness schedule, whatever. Next thing you know, this is a person who was 300 pounds suddenly down to like 159% body fat. So it's like, it was very simple advice. It's not like it's anything complicated that he said, but that was probably the best approach that I heard. And it can be transferred to many areas of life. It doesn't have to be just fitness, even working hard, which I'm assuming you mean a certain field of professional development. Maybe you start small, you find something that you do like. There's like maybe a certain project you want to do involves 9 tasks. And out of those 9 tasks, you only like 2. Start with those 2 until you become consistent with those 2. When you become consistent and really good with those 2, you'll add the 3rd, and you'll keep adding things until you get to the 9. That's essentially how I think the best, easiest way to develop discipline really is.
Okay, let's move on to the final question. We'll end off with a fun question. How does that sound?
Okay.
So this is a throwback, if you remember. Briyani or Nihari, and why?
Ooh, same answer, my guy. Biryani. There's no doubt. There's no question in my mind. Every time you ask me, it's gonna be the same answer. Biryani. All the way.
No, but Nihari's got that red meat though, bro. That testosterone boost.
It does. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Nihari is not up there. Biryani, come on, bro. It just slaps a different way.
It does not slap. It depends on the biryani too, man. Because you got 100 different biryani flavors. You got barbecue, deli, Cindy,
Very fair point.
Mumbai biryani. Nihari, it only comes in. Oh yeah, aloo, bro. Aloo and biryani slaps, bro. Potato biryani.
Come on, man. Now I can't trust your opinion at all. Now I can't trust your opinion at all.
How can I trust your opinion if you don't put potatoes in your biryani, bro?
No, bro. No, we can't. I don't play that game, bro. I don't play that game at all.
Oh, I can't believe this guy. Oh man, and he went biryani over Nihari. Musa, man, next time we see each other in person, it's scrap on the spot right there and then. I'll show you what a real boxer is.
We can scrap, or we can talk it over a big plate of biryani, and then you can tell me why you changed.
No. I refuse. Next time we meet each other, we gotta go out for food, man. It's been so long.
I know, man. Since Nando's, freaking hell.
Oh man, we gotta go to a nice spot this time. Let's go to Cry Boys.
No, good, nice spot. This guy.
Bro, what do you think of the new Ridgeway Plaza in Saga?
It's busy, man. I like it. I like that it's there because there's always something to do. It's just annoying sometimes. Like, I do like busy places, but when it's busy and it's rowdy busy, that's when it's kind of annoying. Where it's just like dirty, people throwing the trash everywhere, that kind of stuff. It's like people like honking in parking lots. Like, come on, that's not necessary. That gets a
Very
little annoying,
true.
but otherwise, dope place.
Very, I love that place too. The only issue is all those Brampton and Saga mans running around, ruining everything, driving their Hondas, Toyotas. Like every time I walk by the Ridgeway Plaza, I'm walking around there, I see at least 4 or 5,
It's
10
embarrassing to see.
Saga mans. And you're always looking over your
Bro,
shoulder, too, like,
it's so
does this guy know
embarrassing
me?
to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Musa, man, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on. And everybody, are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
Are you not entertained? My guy, happy to be here. Always happy to support your projects. This guy's gonna go far, mark my words.
Вот это уже чуть.
А ты я дома и смог.
Perfect.